I'm going to be sending out an offer for every single one of these players in this video. But before we get to them, I do want to recap the guys that we had in last week's buy low video and talk about our current stance on them as of Wednesday. Garrett Wilson is a wide receiver that will show up in this video. Amon-Ra St. Brown, yes, is somebody that maybe you could have found someone panicking last week if your league mate didn't know what they were doing. And obviously, your time to buy has passed. Malik Neighbors was a clear buy low candidate after week one. Hope you sent your offers then. That time has now passed. Keon Coleman, we'll talk about in this video. Still think he's very interesting. T. Higgins, we'll talk about in this video. I still think he's very interesting. DJ Moore, we had as a buy low candidate. I was expecting Roma Dunze to actually miss more time. It's the same thing with Keenan Allen. And honestly, with both wide receivers coming back in and Caleb not really looking too inspiring, I don't think you need to sell DJ Moore by any means, but not excited enough to say that he is still a buy low candidate. And then we had Trey McBride as a buy low candidate last week. He is my tight end one now rest of season based off what we've had from this Cardinals offense 2 weeks in. And yes, we will have a tight end for you in this video just in case you missed out on McBride last week. But let's go ahead and let's go over to the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Bengals have been extremely frustrating. And I think this is maybe the first time we've ever had an entire offense in a buy low video, because I think you can buy low on every single one of these players, because I am personally expecting the Cincinnati Bengals to be a significantly better offense going into the future than what you've had through the first 2 weeks. If we go ahead and look at Cincinnati, starting off 0-2, you would naturally assume, okay, this is a team that's going to maybe be 500 at the end of the season. But no, if you pull up current Las Vegas sportsbook odds, you actually see that the expected win total for the Cincinnati Bengals rest of season is currently over under about 9.5 wins. So people are currently betting that the Bengals are going to go 10-5 from here on out. If not 10-5, 9-6, that this will be a much better team going into the future. If you go over and look at implied team totals from Las Vegas sportsbooks for this week going up against the Washington Commanders, Vegas sportsbooks are putting the Cincinnati Bengals as the highest scoring offense in the NFL. Now, obviously, it's a great matchup going up against Washington, but at the same time, y'all know what I say year in and year out. We need to listen to these sports books. They're giving us clear, actionable data. And I think that this is enough for me, as well as seeing the natural progression in week 2, to assume that this will yet again be another top offense in the NFL. If you go ahead and look at what we've had from the receivers, Ja'Marr Chase has been buns. I took him at pick 7 in the Flock League. Somehow, your boy's still 2-0, despite Ja'Marr Chase giving us a total of 97 receiving yards through the first 2 weeks with 0 receiving touchdowns. Despite Ja'Marr Chase going out there and just probably having more, definitely having more cries on the football field than touchdowns this season. But going into the future, I have Ja'Marr Chase personally ranked at wide receiver 3. I would still rather have him over Jefferson. I think it's a much better offense. I'd still rather have him over Tyreek. I think Cincinnati will be a much better offense than Miami going into the future. And then going over to T. Higgins. With Higgins, you haven't seen him through the first 2 weeks. Obviously, dealing with the hamstring, super frustrating. Hopefully, we are going to get Higgins back in week 3. Honestly, I think if you look at the sportsbook data right now, they are kind of projecting that we should see Higgins against Washington. I think the addition of Higgins into this offense, plus Ja'Marr Chase being incorporated a little bit more, knowing that he missed pretty much all of training camp, should allow this Bengals offense to look dramatically different going into the future. I have Higgins ranked at wide receiver 28 in my rest of season rankings. I have him directly behind Zay Flowers and Tank Dell, and I have him directly ahead of Michael Pittman Jr., Xavier Worthy. Talk about one of those other wide receivers a little later on. But honestly, the best buy in this offense isn't even at wide receiver. The best buy in this offense is somebody that's looked bad through the first 2 weeks, and that is Zach Moss. With Zach Moss, I didn't know if it was going to be him or Chase Brown coming into the season. I threw my hands up and said, if I had to bet on somebody, it would be Moss, but I think you can draft both guys because both of them have a shot to be a starting running back. What's very surprising to me is the usage that Zach Moss has had in comparison to Chase Brown. You look at this past week, Zach Moss played 51 snaps in comparison to Chase Brown at 13. Zach Moss ran 26 routes out of this backfield. Moss has had 5 targets so far through the first 2 weeks of the year. He's had 21 rush attempts. If we get better game environments for the Cincinnati Bengals, where they're able to win games from pretty much start to finish, run the ball a little bit more in the second half, and ultimately average more than about 20 points per game. I think that you are going to be in a spot where Zach Moss is actually going to crush going forward into the future. I have him as my RB25. I very much am considering moving him ahead of Najee Harris officially as our RB24. You're going to hate where I have him ranked in our running back rankings this week in a very good matchup against a sad Washington Commanders defense. I think he's the clear 3-down running back in what I expect to be one of the best offenses in the NFL going into the future. If you can buy him as an RB3 and use him as your RB2, I would absolutely love that. I promise you I'm sending an offer in the Flock League today before this video comes out. And then obviously I don't mind if you want to buy low on Joe Burrow. I can't say that this entire offense is going to be much better without saying that Burrow will. Burrow's had 422 passing yards through the first 2 weeks, 2 passing touchdowns. Obviously we know he doesn't have a lot of rushing upside, but I would still very much clearly rather have him over guys like Dak Prescott and Jared Goff going into the future. Now I will double down on Garrett Wilson here. I'm going to be super brief. If for whatever reason you have a league mate panicking on Garrett Wilson, if they don't know what they're doing, I will be there to scoop him up on the cheap. I still have Wilson ranked as a top 10 wide receiver rest of season. I have him at wide receiver 7, directly behind Tyreek Hill, Nico Collins. And now with the A.J. Brown hamstring injury, I have Wilson directly ahead of A.J. Brown and Marvin Harrison Jr., which maybe that looks extremely aggressive with how damn good Harrison was this past week. But going into the future, what I am personally expecting from this Aaron Rodgers-led Jets offense is I think you are going to have significantly more passing volume. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but right now, Aaron Rodgers has a total of 343 passing yards through the first 2 weeks of his Jets career. Now, out of those 343 passing yards, Garrett Wilson has accounted for 117 of them. Out of the 51 Aaron Rodgers pass attempts, Garrett Wilson has accounted for 17 of them. Garrett Wilson is continuing to put up elite market share numbers. The issue is the passing volume simply has not been there in this Jets offense. Now, if you go into this next week, it does appear that this may be your last shot to go and buy any Jets on the cheap, because you actually have a 22-point implied team total for the Jets going up against the New England Patriots defense here. Vegas is saying that they will be a better offense. I tend to think that they will be as well. So I'm completely fine buying Garrett Wilson on the cheap under the assumption that there's more passing volume in New York going forward. One thing that I love doing with Garrett Wilson as well is actually taking the higher on 64.5 receiving yards going up against the New England Patriots this Thursday. And if you wanted to check that pick out, you can over there on Underdog Fantasy. The link's in the description comment section. If you use code FLOCK, you're going to be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus code FLOCK will get you a free CeeDee Lamb pick, more than less than half a total yard. And code FLOCK will get you an additional Aaron Rodgers free pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Thursday night game. And code FLOCK give you that 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000, a free team review in a live stream that we are hosting every single night. So make sure you take advantage of that with a link in the comment section. Now let's go over to our next buy low candidate. You know what? I'm going to throw 2 guys in here together. We are going to look at the combination of both Brandon Ayuk as well as George Kittle. Now, obviously with Ayuk, he's been horrendous this season. If you've been starting Brandon Ayuk, you've probably been losing your matchups. You're sitting here through the first 2 weeks with 6 total receptions and 71 total receiving yards. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why I would like to buy Brandon Ayuk. We do get the news that Deebo Samuel is going to be missing some time here. And not only is Deebo missing time, but also if you look at Las Vegas sportsbooks, they are continuing to project out the Niners to be one of the best offenses in the NFL this week and going into the future. I think that we're going to get a bounce back from the San Francisco 49ers offense. And if you look at Ayuk, this is a similar situation which Jamar Chase suffered in that he wasn't at training camp. He missed so much time that it makes sense that he starts a little bit slower. So honestly, I would have been buying him low regardless of if Deebo Samuel was going to be missing any time or not. But if you actually go ahead and look at the splits with and without Deebo Samuel for Brandon Ayuk, you'll see that in games with Deebo, Ayuk's only averaging 5.8 targets per contest. And in games with no Deebo, Brandon Ayuk is actually up at 7.14. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you to go out there and offer Tyreek Hill for Brandon Ayuk. Of course not. If I'm giving you 10 players to go out and put offers for, you lowball all owners and see if you can get one of those little fish to bite on that hook And then that's the guy we go after. So if I was sending a trade offer for Brandon Ayuk, I would love to go and send somebody like DK Metcalf. But personally, I do have Brandon Ayuk ranked at wide receiver 11 in my rest of season rankings, behind Harrison and Rashee Rice, and directly ahead of Devontae Adams and Malik Neighbors. Now going over to George Kittle here. Kittle may be the more interesting buy between the two because maybe, just maybe, your league mates don't understand how good Kittle projects out in an offense with no Deebo Samuel. If we look at the splits with and without Deebo Samuel for George Kittle, dating back to 2021, we've seen 7 games with no Deebo Samuel. And in those 7 games, George Kittle has averaged 22.5 points per game. He has averaged 97.5 receiving yards per contest. This past week, we get the glimpse of Kittle coming out and actually giving you 8 targets, 7 receptions, 76 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. We know also that usage across the line of scrimmage, particularly in the receiving game, is kind of gone from running back as well. We're back when McCaffrey's in this offense. You're expecting Kittle to maybe have to lose a target or two to McCaffrey out of the backfield, where McCaffrey's averaging 5-6 targets per game. Jordan Mason is getting his 1 reception per game and is kind of lucky to get that, to be honest. So I personally have moved George Kittle up to tight end 5 in my rest of season rankings. I have Kittle only behind McBride, Laporta, Kelsey, and Bowers. And to be honest with you, I'm debating on putting Kittle at tight end 1 or tight end 2 in my week 3 rankings. I think he is absolutely going to crush over the next month. Now, moving over to what we have with a player that I put on a sell high video last week, and I know we're saying to buy low this week. I am sorry. I don't like doing this, but I feel like we have to. We're going to go over and look at Xavier Worthy. Now, with Xavier Worthy, at the time that we said he was a sell high candidate, he was coming off a game where he had 3 total targets for 2 total touchdowns. And I was operating under the assumption as of last week, because all the information at our disposal said so, that Hollywood Brown would be back in either week 2, week 3, or week 4. Well, now things are a little bit different. Xavier Worthy's coming off a game where he's had 2 receptions and 17 receiving yards. And we don't have to worry about Hollywood Brown coming back into this offense. It looks like Worthy has a very clear path to increase his opportunities as the season goes forward. And the Isaiah Pacheco injury is actually going to skew things a bit here for the Kansas City Chiefs. You saw this in week 2, and we actually had a little bit of it in week 1, and especially it was the case all last year. The Chiefs were an extremely well-balanced offense. The Chiefs are going out there and running the ball at one of the highest clips in the NFL, despite having one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL with Patrick Mahomes. And you can do that when you have a great defensive coordinator, when you have a great defense, and you know Mahomes isn't going to turn the ball over at the end of the game. You can kind of play keep away. You can play game control. You can win a lot of football games that way. But now that you downgrade from Isaiah Pacheco to the combination of Carson Steele, Samaje Perine, and Kareem Hunt, the run-to-pass ratio in this offense, I don't think it's going to dramatically swing where the Chiefs are going to go back to their 2018 selves with a prime Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill on the same note. I don't think that will be the case, but I do think what we see with the Chiefs here is them actually being a little bit more pass happy, not being one of the league's most run heavy offenses. I think the passing volume comes up in Kansas City. I think the Hollywood injury at the same time skews more volume going over to Xavier Worthy, and you're not having to buy Worthy coming off a game with 2 touchdowns in prime time, and instead you're buying Worthy coming off a game with a total of 17 receiving yards. So I hate to put a buy low candidate for a player that was a sell high for us last week. I'm going to try my best to not do this again all season. But when the situation is flipped this dramatically and the price, I don't think really is increased from where it was a week ago because of the down performance in week 2, I think I'm actually really excited to go put out some offers for Xavier Worthy. Now, another rookie wide receiver that we need to look at here will be a Mr. Keon Coleman. Now, looking at Keon Coleman, I understand that this past week he was extremely disappointing. This past week, he gives you 0 receptions, 0 receiving yards off of 1 measly target. It's super disappointing. I understand that if you started him, maybe you lost your matchup because of it. But with Keon Coleman going into the future, I'm expecting that this is a much better passing offense. Going up against the Dolphins, obviously Tua was a train wreck before he goes down. And then once Tua goes down, you're going up against Skylar Thompson and you already have a massive lead. You actually see the Buffalo Bills be extremely run heavy against Miami. I mean, you have a total of 19 pass attempts for Josh Allen in comparison to 26 rush attempts in this offense. You have 139 passing yards for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Now, I did take Buffalo to be my Super Bowl champ in 2024. Hopefully, this continues to look well. But to be honest with you, I'm not expecting them to absolutely blow out every single team, right? I think you're going to get more competitive contests. I think you are going to get some 300 passing yard Josh Allen games. And while Shakir was yet again the wide receiver with the majority of the fantasy points in Buffalo, you look at the underlying usage, Keon Coleman played the most snaps. Keon Coleman, 41 snaps compared to Shakir at 31. Keon Coleman ran the most routes. I mean, not a massive difference, right? 18 and 17. But we are seeing Keon Coleman be used as the wide receiver one in this offense. Now, the target volume isn't there just yet, but also Keon Coleman is a rookie wide receiver. Keon Coleman is a wide receiver that came out of college after only 3 seasons, so he doesn't turn 22 until May. I expect Keon to continue to get better. He's already being used as the wide receiver one in Buffalo, and I think this offense is going to have a lot more passing volume going into the future. Now, the last little group of players that I want to put on here is just a reminder. Nick Chubb, TJ Hawkinson, Jonathan Brooks. We are in week 3. These players are eligible to return in week 5. Now, I'm not expecting any or all of them to return in week 5. But I just want to talk about the psychology of a fantasy football drafter and manager. What you see time and time again is in your fantasy football draft, somebody is going to take Jonathan Brooks because they're going to be thinking long term. They're going to be thinking, oh, okay, I want the upside when we get to the fantasy football playoffs. And then when we're in week 3, they're sitting there 1-1. They're panicking that they need to win this next matchup. And they don't realize, hey, 2 weeks have already gone by. Jonathan Brooks is closer to returning. Jonathan Brooks is actually more valuable than he was when you selected him. He's out of sight, out of mind. His value in their heads has probably actually decreased as they've gone from the long-term mentality to the short-term mentality. So if you have one of these injured guys, as long as you're not 0-2, as long as you don't fall to being 0-3, please don't trade them away. And at the same time, if you're asking an owner for maybe a wide receiver swap and they're sitting there with Nick Chubb on their IR, you could possibly just ask for them to throw in Nick Chubb and see if you could potentially get a deal done on the cheap while they're not thinking about these options. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, really do appreciate you. And of course, if you wanted to check out those Underdog Pick'ems, you can find the link in the description and comment section. And if you use code FLOCK, you're going to be getting an Aaron Rodgers special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard for Thursday night. And you will also be getting a CeeDee Lamb special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard for Sunday. Code FLOCK will get you an additional 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 and a free team review on a live stream that we're doing every single night. So make sure you take advantage of that. Find the link in the description and comment section. Thank you again. Really do appreciate you and really hope I can see you out and break down your team in the live stream tonight.